The sun had just begun to set over the city of Ouagadougou, which is the capital of Burkina Faso, and it threw a golden hue across the streets of the city, which were filled with people living their lives. On that particular day, President Ibrahim Traoré insisted on walking a short distance, despite the fact that he was surrounded by the typical security of armored cars and elite guards. This was a rare moment of independence, and perhaps it was a hint of nostalgia. On the other hand, there was nothing that could have fully prepared him for what he was about to be forced to examine. On that site, at the crossroads of an old street that was covered in dust, there was a man, sitting there, clad in clothes that were ripped. Both the passage of time and the effects of malnutrition had contributed to the sunken appearance of his eyes. A tin that has been damaged can be placed in front of him, and it has the potential to catch a few pennies from those who are fleeing from the area. It was not the extreme poverty that struck President Traoré. Rather, it was the expressions on the faces of the people. It turned out to be Mamadou. This was his best friend ever since he was a young lad. In addition, at that same moment, the most powerful man in the country came to a complete and total standstill, and tears began to stream down his face. It is in the first chapter that you will find the boy from the village. At one point in time, Ibrahim was merely a young boy who resided in a small village that was located in close proximity to Bobo Dioulasso. This was a significant amount of time before the revolution, before the speeches, and before the fatigues that the military experienced. During that time period, life was simple. Schools were constructed out of wood, slates were covered with chalk, and races were conducted barefoot across expansive fields. Mamadou was the cause for the extraordinary nature of those days. The innocence that characterized those days was not the only thing that made them special. In general, Mamadou was a person who was brimming with ideas and was known for his wit and outspokenness. On the other hand, Mamadou had aspirations of establishing educational institutions, supplying sustenance to children, and supporting widows, whilst Ibrahim had aspirations of leadership positions in military organizations. It was impossible to have one without the other. The fact that they were brothers in spirit was proved by every action that they made, whether it was stealing mangoes from the orchard in the hamlet or skipping stones on the riverbed. As members of the same family, they were acquainted with one another. Ibrahim's father, who had served in the military for a significant amount of time, constantly admonished Hissens for playing in close proximity to the military station, a commitment that they would never forget where they came from was something that Mamadou's mother, who was a teacher, always made them make. She insisted that they make this commitment. Moreover, they never in their wildest dreams believed that they would. What is known as Chapter 2 is the promise. In the vicinity of the baobab tree, within the confines of their neighborhood, there was a particular tree that stood out like a guardian over their memories. The baobab tree was really quite impressive. There, in that spot, which was one afternoon after school, the two young guys made a pledge to one another concerning their relationship. As Mamadou had stated, "We come back for the other one if one of us makes it here." This is something that happens on a consistent basis every time. On the other hand, Ibrahim gave a somber nod. Every single time. In order to ensure that they would keep their pledge, they carved their names into the bark of the tree, demonstrating the kind of innocence that can only be found in children. On the other hand, reality, as it so usually does, would put that commitment to the test in ways that none of them could have reasonably anticipated. On the other side of the roads that separated us, third chapter. As the years passed, both guys continued on their individual journeys in their separate fields. Mohammed Ibrahim's strong intelligence and disciplined character grabbed the attention of people who recruit students into the military. These individuals were interested in recruiting. Ibrahim. By the time he was in his early 20s, he had already enlisted in military academies, and he progressed through the ranks of the military very swiftly. At a time when Burkina Faso was on the verge of anarchy, the nation required a leader, and Ibrahim was well on his way to being that leader. Mamadou, on the other hand, took a different path than the others. Following the passing of his mother and the failing health of his father, he made the decision to continue living in the region. There were quite a few opportunities available. Some of the odd jobs that he worked included masonry, field labor, and market hawking. He also worked in the market. In order to meet the requirements of his siblings, he gave up his own goals and objectives in order to assist them in meeting their requirements. No one ever responded to any of Ibrahim's letters. There was never a response. There was a word going about that he had moved to the capital, and it was even possible that he had moved to another nation. However, Mamadou did not give up hope that his brother would return. He continued to hold out hope. While all of this was going on, Ibrahim was amidst a whirlwind of political intrigue, coups, and other forms of political maneuvering. The level of solitude that one experienced rose in proportion to the rank that one attained. In spite of the fact that he never forgot Mamadou, it seemed as though time passed him by, since he was so focused in his duty to the nation. His pledge became less relevant as a result of the combination of the clamor of praise and the stillness of treachery. Isolation and power in the world is the topic of Chapter 4. By the time the year 2022 rolled around, Ibrahim Traoré had been elected president, following a brutal military takeover of the country. He was hailed as a hero, a patriot, and a symbol of hope for a nation that had been exploited and broken for a significant amount of time. Power, on the other hand, comes with a price tag attached to it. Every decision that needed to be made was a challenge. A grin is nothing more than a mask. Furthermore, despite the fact that he had the backing of his people and the power of the military, there was one thing that he did not have anymore, and that was peace. Reflecting on the community was something he did quite regularly. There are no mango trees left. The river is known as Mamadou. In addition to that, after a brief period of introspective reflection, he issued the directive to his staff to conduct an investigation into the whereabouts of his childhood friend. He wished to be informed about what had transpired with him. It was discovered that there were no records. In the system, there was not a single trace of Mamadou to be found. Those were the beliefs that they held. Chapter 5 is titled The Involvement, wherein it was planned that the walk would be a routine one, and it was supposed to be a representation of humility. Ibrahim continued to walk through the streets despite the fact that he was moving through the streets without his entire entourage. It was in the vicinity of a food market, which was situated in close proximity to the boundaries of the old area, that he came upon the beggar. A glimmer of familiarity appeared in his mind at first, but he made the decision to ignore it. It is not possible to do that. The posture, the scar that was positioned near the eyebrow, and the voice that was shaking, while singing an ancient lullaby, were all things that he noticed as he moved closer to the person. "Is that you, Madou?" This man raised his eyes to the sky. His pupils widened significantly. "Who is Ibrahim?" For a brief period of time, there was no sound whatsoever coming from the city. During the time when the guards were attempting to protect the president, he raised his hand, which led them to become perplexed. At that moment, the president of Burkina Faso bent down in the dust and gave the beggar a warm embrace. All of the events that transpired at this precise instant took place. A gasp was heard from the witnesses. It was a click from the camera. Tears were shed by this. Leader. This does not constitute tears of humiliation. Even guilt is not the issue. The heartbreak, on the other hand, was profound and soul-crushing. In Chapter 6, the title of the chapter is The Tears of a President. After that, Mamadou sat in the peace and quiet of the presidential palace, where she had finally finished getting clothed and bathing, and where she was now completely silent. Ibrahim whispered at his friend, "I failed you," but he was unable to meet his friend's face. "I failed you." Mamadou responded with a no, despite the fact that his voice was gruff but kind. "During the time that you were in charge of a nation, my objective was to come up with a way to save a family. Both of us were forced into conflict by life. The only difference is that we carried out our battles in different ways. I must, however, make a promise to you. I never once held you accountable for breaking it, and I apologize for that, due to the fact that I am familiar with how you are feeling, Mohammed," the young man who was dressed in the outfit never left at any point in time. During the course of the talk, which lasted for many hours, they shared memories, laughed, and even sang a song from their younger years. While this was going on, Ibrahim was clenching his friend's hands as if they were extremely sacred, observing his guards with awe, he thought to himself. His counselors just left it up to them to handle on their own. The palace did not have a frigid atmosphere for the first time in a long time. President Traoré reunites with childhood friend, living on the streets, was the headline. That ran on the national news television network the following morning. This is the beginning of Chapter 7, A Rewritten Life for the Author. This was not only a time for public relations, rather, it was a moment that would prove to be decisive. It is a state initiative that was created by Traoré as a new program with the objective of reintegrating and hiring homeless individuals, veterans, and citizens who have been displaced from their homes. Dignity First is a state project. Because of his efforts, Mamadou became the campaign's symbolic face over the course of its duration. The fact remains that Mamadou did not make the decision to dwell in the palace. My heart is filled with a great want to go back to the village. There is still a significant number of children who are hungry, and there are teachers who are lacking in chalk for whatever reason. As a result, Traoré began to distribute assets. He reconstructed the school that was already there, rebuilt the shrine that was located on the baobab tree. In addition, the president would pay an unexpected visit to the tree every few weeks in order to simply sit beneath it and have a talk with his friend. This would take place without any prior coordination. In the final episode of the series, Brotherhood Beyond Thrones plays out. A number of years passed. Following the outbreak of the revolution, Ibrahim remained in power for a longer period of time than any previous leader who had come before him. Education in rural areas, mental health treatment, and the rehabilitation of those living in poverty all saw major improvements as a direct result of his work. However, the moment that made him feel the most proud was not when he was standing in the chambers of the African Union, or when he was surrounded by leaders from other countries. The following inquiry was posed to him by a group of children who approached him in the middle of a dusty afternoon in the village. Are you telling the truth when you say that you were the best of friends with Mamadou, the person who instructed you? And he flashed a grin. It continues to be the situation. The tale of two names that were carved into the bark of an old baobab tree was told to the wind by the wind somewhere beneath the shade of the old baobab tree. The names were etched into the bark of the tree: a president and a person who is living in poverty, an idealist who is also a fighter in the world. Two young guys who made a promise and stayed true to it throughout their lives.